My name is Michael Thompson, but most people just call me Mike. I am not a complicated guy. I have always lived a pretty straightforward life, and I am content with that. I work as an engineer for a large national firm, which means I am surrounded by numbers and data all day. It is not the most exciting job in the world, but it has paid the bills, supported my family, and allowed me to provide a good life for my wife, Jennifer, and our two daughters, Emily and Sarah. Jennifer and I have been married for 25 years. We have been through thick and thin together, raising our girls and building a life in Raleigh, North Carolina. The girls are now both off at college. Emily is studying at Brown University in Rhode Island, and Sarah is at Boston University in Massachusetts. They have always been good kids, hardworking and focused, so we did not have to worry too much about them. With both girls away, Jennifer and I were supposed to have more time for ourselves again. I imagined it would be like a second honeymoon, dinners out, weekend getaways, and rediscovering our connection. I was really looking forward to this new chapter in our lives. But over time, I started noticing some changes in Jennifer. Jennifer teaches English at a local high school and has always dreamed of becoming a writer. Over the years, she has dabbled in writing, participating in different writers' groups and submitting short stories to various literary magazines. She is passionate about it, I will give her that, but she has never quite broken through. Her stories were often rejected, and I think that ate away at her a little. Yet, I supported her dreams because I loved her, and I wanted her to be happy. Last spring, she joined a new writing group that seemed to be more intense than the ones she had been in before. There was one member of the group, a guy named Tom, who made me uneasy from the start. He was a bit too familiar with Jennifer, always laughing at her jokes, finding ways to sit next to her at their meetings, and even referencing conversations that seemed to happen outside the group. Something about his attitude did not sit right with me, but Jennifer brushed it off, saying I was being paranoid. One night, during one of their group meetings, I overheard a conversation that stuck with me. They were talking about famous writers and how they were often driven by passionate relationships outside their marriages. Tom seemed particularly keen on the idea that great writing came from intense personal experiences. Jennifer laughed along, and I felt a twinge in my gut that told me something was off. Then, one evening in April, I walked into the kitchen and overheard Jennifer on the phone. She was saying, "I cannot wait for these 6 weeks away, just me and my writing, no responsibilities, no commitments. I deserve this." When I walked in, she quickly ended the call and told me she was just talking to her friend, Susan. But I knew she was lying. I did not push it right then, but my suspicion grew. A few days later, she told me she had been accepted into a 6-week writer's workshop at the University of Illinois. She said it was a great opportunity, and she was so excited. She mentioned it was something she needed to do for herself. I wanted to be happy for her, but I could not shake the feeling that there was more to it than just writing. I suggested that I could take some time off work and join her in Illinois for a week or two, maybe sit in on a few of the talks. Her reaction was immediate. She laughed nervously and told me, "Oh, no, that is not necessary. It is going to be very intense, and I will not have any free time." The way she said it made me feel like I was intruding on something I was not supposed to be a part of. That is when I started to dig a little deeper. I began to check her phone records and noticed calls from a number that was not familiar to me, a number she had been speaking with almost every day. I decided to ask her about it directly, but she brushed it off as a friend from her writers' group. I wanted to believe her, but the pit in my stomach kept getting deeper. And that is how it all started, the first seeds of doubt, the first cracks in the trust that had held us together for so many years. Looking back, I can see that it was the beginning of the end, even if I did not want to admit it then. After that conversation, things started to change between Jennifer and me. There was a distance that had not been there before. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself that maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe I was just being paranoid, letting my insecurities get the best of me. But every time I looked at Jennifer, I could not shake the feeling that she was hiding something from me. A couple of weeks later, Jennifer came home one evening with a huge smile on her face. She seemed excited, more alive than I had seen her in months. She said, "Mike, I have got some great news. I bought you and your buddy Greg tickets for a fishing trip up in Canada. I figured it would be a perfect way for you to relax and have fun while I am at the workshop." Now, I love fishing as much as the next guy, but this felt too convenient. It was like she was trying to get rid of me, make sure I was far away while she was at this workshop. I looked at her and said, "That is nice of you, Jen, but you know I would rather be with you. Why do I need to be so far away?" She paused, then gave a little laugh. "Oh, come on, Mike, you need a break too. And besides, I am just trying to do something nice for you. It is not like I will be having any fun at this workshop. It is going to be all work, no play." I wanted to believe her, but the nervousness in her laugh told me everything I needed to know. She was hiding something. That night, I did not sleep much. I kept replaying our conversations in my mind, trying to make sense of it all. The next day, I decided I needed to find out for sure what was going on. I could not just sit around feeling like a fool. So, I reached out to an old friend of mine who had been through something similar. He had suspected his wife of cheating and had hired a private investigator to find out the truth. He gave me the contact information of a detective he had used, a guy named Paul Henderson. I hesitated at first. I felt like hiring a private investigator was a huge step, like I was crossing a line I could never come back from. But I also knew I needed answers. I could not keep living with the doubt gnawing at me. I called Paul and explained the situation. He listened patiently and asked me a few questions about Jennifer's upcoming trip, her writing group, and the people she had been hanging around with. Then he said, "Mike, I have been doing this for a long time. If your gut is telling you something is wrong, it probably is. I can put a team together in Illinois to keep an eye on things. We will gather some information, and if there is nothing to worry about, you will have peace of mind. But if there is, well, at least you will know the truth." I agreed to hire him, and he immediately got to work. He set up surveillance at the University of Illinois, where the workshop was going to be held. His team was discreet, posing as students or staff, blending in with the crowd. They had eyes on Jennifer from the moment she arrived. Meanwhile, I tried to keep up appearances at home. I acted normal, pretending to be supportive of Jennifer's trip, even suggesting that she should stay an extra week if she needed to. Inside, though, I was a wreck. I kept checking my phone, waiting for updates from Paul. Every time it buzzed, my heart would leap into my throat. About a week into Jennifer's trip, Paul called me. "Mike," he said, "I think you were right to be suspicious. We have seen Jennifer spending a lot of time with a man named Tom, the same guy from her writers group, I assume. They have been together almost constantly since she arrived. I am going to send you some photos and videos. You should see for yourself." My stomach sank as I waited for the email to come through. When I opened the files, I felt my heart shatter. There she was, my Jennifer, holding hands with Tom, kissing him, acting like a teenager in love. I scrolled through the photos in disbelief, my hands shaking. There were even videos of them sneaking into each other's dorm rooms late at night, spending hours together behind closed doors. I could not breathe. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something. Instead, I just sat there, staring at my computer screen, feeling the weight of betrayal crush down on me. I had my answer now, and it was worse than I ever imagined. After seeing those photos and videos, my mind was racing, but one thing was clear: I could not stay in this marriage. There was no coming back from this kind of betrayal. I loved Jennifer, I really did, but I could not forgive what she had done. The trust we had built over 25 years was shattered, and no amount of apologies or explanations was going to fix that. That night, I could not sleep. I sat up in bed, thinking about what to do next. I knew I had to leave, but how? I did not want a big confrontation. I did not want to hear her lies or her excuses. I wanted out, clean and quick. I did not care what anyone else would think. I needed to get away from her, from the house we had shared, from everything that reminded me of the life I thought we had. I started planning. First, I made a list of everything I needed to do before Jennifer came back from Illinois. I decided to talk to a lawyer about filing for divorce. I wanted to know what my options were, how I could protect myself, and make sure that Jennifer would not be able to take anything else from me. The next morning, I called a local divorce attorney named Diane. I told her my situation, and she was sympathetic. She had seen it all before. She gave me some advice on how to handle the property, the bank accounts, and the paperwork. If you want to make a clean break, she said, you will need to move quickly. Make sure you take care of everything before she gets back. That way, there is less room for drama. That is exactly what I intended to do. I made arrangements to sell some of the furniture, boxed up all my personal belongings, and scheduled a moving company to come by in a few days. I started closing out our joint bank accounts and opening new ones in my name only. I even removed Jennifer as a beneficiary from my life insurance policy. If she wanted to leave me for another man, fine, but she was not going to have my money too. I decided to leave the house to Jennifer. I figured it would save us both a lot of hassle if I just signed over my share to her. The place had too many memories anyway, and I did not want to be there another day. I signed the paperwork with my lawyer and left it on the kitchen counter for Jennifer to find when she got back. I also changed the locks on the house, just in case she got back earlier than expected. I knew Jennifer would be back in about 3 weeks, so I still had some time. I booked a flight to Portland, Maine, where my company had another office. I had already spoken to my boss about transferring. He was understanding, especially after I explained my situation. He had been through something similar himself, and he made it easy for me to make the move. He set everything up for me in Portland, and I would start working there in a few weeks. It seemed like the perfect place to start over, a fresh beginning in a new town where nobody knew what had happened. I sent Jennifer a couple of text messages, trying to keep up appearances. I told her I missed her and hoped she was enjoying the workshop. I could hardly stand to read her replies. She acted like everything was normal, like nothing had happened. I knew she was spending her days with Tom, sneaking around, laughing behind my back. The worst part was, she probably thought I was completely clueless. Every time I got a text from her, it only made me more determined to leave. I decided to send her a message of my own, one that would ruin her final weeks with Tom. I found the clearest, most incriminating photos of her with him, one of them holding hands, another one of them kissing, and a third, more intimate shot that left no room for doubt about what they had been doing. I attached the images to an email with a single line, I know everything. You will be served with divorce papers soon. Then, I turned off my phone. I did not want to hear her excuses. I did not want her to try to explain herself. I just wanted to be gone before she could respond. As far as I was concerned, our marriage was over. I was done being a fool. The next day, I packed up my car with whatever I could fit, my clothes, some personal items, my laptop, and my guitar. I looked around the house one last time. It felt strange, saying goodbye to a place that had been my home for so long. But it was not my home anymore. It was just a reminder of everything I had lost. With one final look, I walked out the door, got in my car, and drove away. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew I was ready to face it without Jennifer. Driving north on the highway, I could not stop thinking about my daughters, Emily and Sarah. I knew I had to tell them what was happening before Jennifer got to them first with her version of the story. They deserved to hear it from me, and they needed to know the truth. But I was dreading this conversation more than anything else. I pulled over at a rest stop somewhere in Virginia, staring at my phone for a few moments, feeling my heart race. I decided to call Emily first. She was the older one and had always been more emotional, wearing her heart on her sleeve. I took a deep breath and dialed her number. "Hi, Dad." Emily's voice was bright and cheerful, which made my stomach twist. "Hey, sweetie," I began, trying to sound steady. "I need to talk to you about something important. It is about your mom and me." There was a pause on the other end. "What is wrong, Dad? Are you guys okay?" "No, honey, we are not," I replied, my voice catching a little. "I found out that your mom has been seeing someone else. She has been having an affair, and I just cannot stay in the marriage anymore." Emily's response was immediate. "What? No, that cannot be true. Mom would never do that." Her voice trembled with disbelief. "I wish it were not true, Emily," I said softly. "But I have proof. I hired a private investigator, and there are pictures, videos. It is with a guy named Tom, from her writing group. I am so sorry to tell you this, but you needed to hear it from me." I heard Emily's breath hitch, and then she started to cry. "I do not understand, Dad. Why would she do this? How could she throw everything away?" "I do not know, sweetheart," I admitted. "I do not have any answers for you. But I want you to know that none of this is your fault. You and your sister mean everything to me, and I am going to be here for both of you, no matter what." She was quiet for a while, just sniffling on the other end of the line. Then, she finally asked, "What happens now? Are you getting a divorce?" "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "I have already started the process. I cannot stay in Raleigh. I need a fresh start. I am moving to Portland, Maine. I have a job lined up there, and I think it is the best thing for me." Emily sniffled again, but there was a hint of resolve in her voice. "I guess I understand. I am so angry, Dad. I cannot believe she would do this." "I know, honey. I know. I am angry too. But we will get through this. I promise." We talked for a little while longer, but I could tell she was still in shock. I promised to come and visit her once I got settled in Portland. She seemed to take some comfort in that, and we ended the call on a slightly better note. Then, I dialed Sarah's number. Sarah was always more calm and collected than her sister, but I knew this news would hit her just as hard. When she answered, she sounded as cheerful as Emily had. "Hey, Dad. What's up?" "Hi, Sarah," I replied, trying to steady my voice. "I have got something serious I need to talk to you about. It is about your mom." She immediately caught the tone in my voice. "What is wrong? Did something happen?" I took a deep breath. "I found out that your mom has been unfaithful, Sarah. She has been seeing another man, for a while now. I cannot stay in this marriage anymore, so I am filing for divorce." There was a long silence on the other end, and I could hear her processing what I had just said. "Wow, Dad. Are you sure about this? I mean, did she admit it?" "She has not admitted it yet," I replied, "but I hired someone to find out, and they got all the proof. It is true, Sarah. I wish it were not, but it is." Sarah let out a slow, deep breath. "I had a feeling something was up," she said finally. "Mom has been acting different. But I never thought it would be this." "I know, sweetheart. I did not either. But it is happening, and we just have to face it." She was quiet for a moment. Then, she asked, "What are you going to do now?" "I am moving to Portland, Maine," I explained. "I have a job waiting for me there. I need to get away from everything here. I will come and see you soon, once I have settled in." Sarah sighed softly. "Okay, Dad. I love you. We will get through this somehow." "I love you too, Sarah," I said, feeling a small sense of relief. We are going to be okay. We are stronger than this. After we hung up, I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. I hated that I had to break my daughter's hearts, but at least they knew the truth now. I had done the hardest thing I needed to do, and I could only hope they would be all right in the end. Once I had talked to Emily and Sarah, I felt a small weight lift off my chest. They knew the truth now, and although it hurt them, I knew they would eventually understand why I had to make this choice. But the hard part was far from over. I still had to put my plan into action. I got back on the road, driving north with a new sense of purpose. I had already arranged for a moving company to pack up my things in a few days, but there were other things I needed to handle before I could disappear for good. I had to make sure Jennifer would not have any leverage over me once she got back from Illinois. The first thing I did was to visit the bank. I closed our joint accounts and moved the money into a new account in my name only. I knew Jennifer would be furious when she found out, but I did not care. I could not afford to let her have access to our savings while she was planning her new life with Tom. I also made sure to remove her as a beneficiary from my life insurance policy. If she was going to betray me, she was not going to profit from it. After that, I called the utility companies and cancelled all the services in my name. I wanted to make it clear that I was cutting all ties. I was done with this chapter of my life, and I did not want any reminders of it. Next, I had to deal with the house. I had already decided that I did not want to fight over it. I had no interest in living there anymore. It was full of memories that I needed to leave behind. I called my lawyer, Diane, and told her to draft up the paperwork to transfer the house over to Jennifer. I want it done as soon as possible, I told her. Just make sure I am not responsible for any of the expenses once I leave. Diane agreed, saying it was a smart move. You are making a clean break, she said. That is the best thing you can do right now. She also confirmed that the divorce papers were being processed and would be served to Jennifer as soon as she returned. I knew that Jennifer would be back in a couple of weeks, so I needed to move quickly. I packed up the last of my personal belongings, the things that meant the most to me. I had already sold some of the furniture, so the house was starting to look empty. I kept a few pieces that I knew Jennifer would not want, and I arranged for the rest to be donated to charity. I was not interested in holding onto anything that reminded me of the past. I also left a little surprise for Jennifer. On the dining room table, I placed a copy of the private investigator's report, along with some of the most incriminating photos of her and Tom. I wanted her to know that I was not leaving because of some vague suspicion. I was leaving because I knew exactly what she had done. I wanted her to see the evidence with her own eyes and realize that she could not talk her way out of this one. For good measure, I also changed the locks on the house. I knew it would send a clear message when she came back and found herself locked out. I wanted her to feel what I had been feeling, shut out, betrayed, abandoned. With everything in motion, I booked a hotel for a few nights while I waited for the movers to finish packing up my things. I needed a place to lay low, where I could gather my thoughts and prepare for the next chapter of my life. I chose a small hotel on the outskirts of town, far enough away from the house to feel like I was already gone. Sitting in that hotel room, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, fear, and, strangely enough, a sense of freedom. I had no idea what the future held, but at least it was a future of my choosing. I was no longer bound by Jennifer's lies. I was free to start over, to find my own path, to rebuild my life from the ground up. I knew it would not be easy. I had a lot of healing to do, a lot of scars that would take time to fade. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control. I had made my decision, and I was sticking to it. I was ready to leave this town and never look back. That night, I turned off my phone again, knowing Jennifer would probably be trying to call or text. I did not want to hear from her. I did not want to hear her excuses or her lies. I was done listening. I had made up my mind, and there was no going back. The next morning, I woke up early in my hotel room, feeling more rested than I had in weeks. I had a few days left before the movers would finish, and I wanted to use that time to wrap up any loose ends. There was still a lot to do before I could leave town for good. I started by driving over to my lawyer's office to sign the final papers transferring the house to Jennifer. Diane was waiting for me with a stack of documents. "Just sign here, here, and here," she said, pointing to several lines. "This will make everything official. Once Jennifer gets back and is served with the divorce papers, we will be all set." I signed my name on the dotted lines, feeling a strange sense of closure with each stroke of the pen. "And you are sure there will not be any issues?" I asked. "I do not want any more surprises." Diane nodded. "You have done everything right, Mike. You have protected your assets, and you are making a clean break. Jennifer cannot touch your finances, and she will not have any claim to your new life in Maine. You are free to go." I thanked her, feeling a little lighter as I left the office. I headed back to the hotel to wait for the movers to finish packing up my things. As I sat in that quiet room, I kept thinking about Jennifer's return and how she would react to everything. I pictured her walking into an empty house, finding the divorce papers, and seeing the photos of her and Tom. Would she cry? Would she be angry? Would she try to call me, or would she just accept that it was over? Part of me hoped she would feel some of the pain I had felt, the betrayal, the heartbreak. I wanted her to know that she had destroyed something good, something we had built together for 25 years. But I also knew I could not dwell on that. I had to focus on moving forward, not looking back. Later that day, I decided to take one last drive around Raleigh, to say my final goodbyes to the places that had been a part of my life for so long. I drove past the park where Jennifer and I used to take the girls when they were little, past the high school where Jennifer taught, and the coffee shop where I had spent countless weekends working on projects or meeting up with friends. I felt a strange mix of nostalgia and sadness, knowing that I would probably never see these places again. But there was also a sense of relief, a feeling that I was closing a chapter of my life that needed to end. On a whim, I drove past our house one last time. The "for sale" sign was still there in the front yard, a stark reminder that I was leaving everything behind. I sat in the car for a few moments, just staring at the house where so many memories had been made, the laughter, the arguments, the quiet moments that only we had shared. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I could not afford to get sentimental now. This was no longer my home. It was just a building, a shell of what it used to represent. I turned the car around and drove away, not looking back. As I headed back to the hotel, my phone buzzed. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but then I decided to take a look. It was a message from Emily. "Dad, I am thinking about you. I love you. Please take care of yourself." A smile crept across my face. I felt a wave of gratitude for my daughters. They were my lifeline in all of this. Even though they were hurting too, they were still standing by me. I sent Emily a quick reply, telling her that I loved her and Sarah, and that I would see them soon. By the end of the day, I got a call from the movers, confirming that they had packed everything and were ready to ship my belongings to Portland. I took a deep breath, realizing that this was it, the final step before I left Raleigh for good. I thanked them and told them to go ahead. Then, I booked a flight to Portland for the next morning. I was leaving earlier than I had planned, but I felt ready. There was nothing left for me here. It was time to move on. That night, I sat on the bed in my hotel room, looking out the window at the city lights. It felt surreal, knowing that I was leaving behind everything I had known for the past 25 years. But there was also a sense of anticipation, a feeling that, maybe, just maybe, something better was waiting for me on the other side. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling a calm settle over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with my decision. I had no idea what the future held, but I was ready to face it head-on. Tomorrow, I would be on a plane to Portland, starting a new life, a life without Jennifer, without lies, without betrayal. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that whatever came next, I would be okay. I was done with the past. I was ready for a fresh start. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of determination. It was a strange feeling, like a mix of anxiety and excitement. Today was the day I would leave my old life behind and step into the unknown. I checked out of the hotel, loaded my few remaining belongings into my car, and drove to the airport. The drive was quiet, the streets mostly empty in the early morning light. I thought about all the times I had driven through Raleigh, taking the girls to school, going to work, meeting Jennifer for lunch. Those moments seemed like a lifetime ago now, part of a different world that I was no longer a part of. At the airport, I parked my car in the long-term lot, knowing I would probably never come back for it. I had already arranged to sell it remotely once I was settled in Portland. I grabbed my suitcase and guitar and made my way to the terminal. I had packed light, just the essentials, some clothes, my laptop, and the guitar I could never part with. Everything else was already on its way to Maine. The check-in process felt surreal, like I was moving through a fog. My mind was racing with thoughts of what was to come, how I would start over, and what my new life would look like. As I waited at the gate, I kept thinking about Emily and Sarah. I hoped they were okay, that they were processing everything in their own way. I knew I would need to see them soon, to reassure them that I was all right, even if our family was falling apart. The flight to Portland was uneventful. I stared out the window, watching the landscape change beneath me, rolling hills giving way to the rugged coastline of New England. As the plane descended, I felt a knot of tension in my stomach. I was about to land in a new city, far from everything I knew, with no real plan except to start over. When I arrived in Portland, I took a cab to a small bed and breakfast I had booked for my first few nights. I figured it would be a good place to rest and get my bearings before finding a more permanent place to stay. The city felt different from Raleigh, smaller, more intimate. The salty breeze from the ocean felt refreshing against my skin, a welcome change from the humid air of North Carolina. After settling in at the bed and breakfast, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. I wandered through cobblestone streets lined with old brick buildings, past small shops and cafes. It was late afternoon, and the city had a calm, relaxed feel to it. I found myself walking along the waterfront, watching boats bobbing in the harbor, their masts swaying gently in the wind. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had no idea what lay ahead, but I was here, and I was free to choose my own path. I decided to visit my new office the next day and introduce myself to my new colleagues. I figured getting back to work would help keep my mind occupied and give me a sense of normalcy. That evening, I found a small seafood restaurant not far from the harbor and treated myself to a simple dinner, fresh lobster and a local beer. As I ate, I thought about Jennifer. I wondered if she had returned home yet, if she had found the papers, the photos, the locks changed. I wondered what she was thinking, how she was feeling. But I quickly pushed those thoughts aside. I could not dwell on her anymore. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. When I got back to the bed and breakfast, I decided to check my phone. I had kept it off during the flight, and now I braced myself as I powered it on. Immediately, it buzzed with missed calls, messages, and voicemails. Most of them were from Jennifer, just as I had expected. But there were also messages from my daughters and a few from friends back in Raleigh. I decided to listen to the ones from Emily and Sarah first. Emily's voice was shaky. "Dad, I hope you are okay. I cannot believe all this is happening. I do not know what to say. Please let me know you are all right. I love you." Sarah's message was more measured, but I could hear the tension in her voice. "Hey, Dad. Just checking in. I hope you made it to Maine safely. I know this is a lot, but we are going to get through it. Call me when you can." Their messages brought a lump to my throat. I knew they were hurting, but I also knew they were strong. I sent them both a quick text, letting them know I had arrived safely and would call them soon. Then, I turned my attention to the messages from Jennifer. I hesitated, not sure if I wanted to hear what she had to say. But I decided I needed to face it. The first few were angry, demanding explanations, accusing me of overreacting, insisting I had it all wrong. Then, her tone shifted to pleading, begging me to talk to her, to hear her side of the story. I felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of resolve. I knew that no matter what she said, it would not change anything. The trust had been broken, and there was no going back. I did not respond. I was not ready to have that conversation yet. Instead, I turned off my phone again, determined to focus on my new beginning. Lying in bed that night, I stared at the ceiling, feeling a mix of fear and hope. I had taken the first steps toward a new life. I was scared of the uncertainty, but I was also excited by the possibilities. Whatever came next, I knew I was strong enough to face it. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of seagulls outside my window, a sharp reminder that I was no longer in North Carolina. For a moment, I felt disoriented, the reality of my new situation still settling in. Then, it hit me, I was in Portland, Maine, starting over. I was far away from the life I had known, far away from Jennifer, and her betrayal. I knew I had to keep moving forward, so I decided to visit my new office. Getting back into a routine would help, I figured. I put on a clean shirt, grabbed my things, and headed out into the cool morning air. Portland had a different vibe than Raleigh, quieter, more laid back. I found it oddly comforting. When I arrived at the office, my new boss, Henry, greeted me with a warm handshake. "Mike. Glad to finally meet you in person," he said, flashing a genuine smile. "We are excited to have you join our team." Henry had a welcoming presence, and his easygoing nature put me at ease right away. He gave me a quick tour, showing me around the small, tight-knit office. The atmosphere was relaxed, almost friendly, a stark contrast to the larger, more impersonal environment I had come from. I was introduced to the team. There were not many of them, but they all seemed genuine, eager to welcome me into their fold. I could already tell this was a place where people supported each other, which was exactly what I needed right now. After the tour, Henry and I sat down to go over my new responsibilities. He asked me a bit about my background, and I told him about my experience back in Raleigh. I kept it light, steering clear of any mention of why I had left. It was a conversation I was not ready to have, even with myself. Henry seemed to sense I was holding back, but he did not press. "I am sure you will fit in just fine here," he said. "We are a small team, but we work hard and look out for each other. You will find Portland is a good place for a fresh start. It is a welcoming city, and there is always something happening." "Thanks, Henry," I replied. "I am looking forward to getting settled and finding my place here." We spent the rest of the morning discussing upcoming projects, and by lunchtime, I felt more confident. A few of my new colleagues invited me out for a coffee, and I agreed, eager to start building connections. As we walked to a nearby cafe, I listened to them talk about their lives in Portland, the local spots to check out, the best seafood places, and even a few hidden gems I should explore. It felt good to be included, to be distracted from my thoughts. After lunch, I decided to take a walk around the city on my own. Portland had a charm that I found appealing, the cobblestone streets, the historic brick buildings, the smell of saltwater in the air. I wandered through the old port district, peeking into quaint shops and enjoying the cool ocean breeze. The harbor was alive with activity, boats bobbing gently in the water as fishermen unloaded their catch. I sat on a bench by the waterfront, watching the waves lap against the pier. For the first time in a long time, I felt a little bit of peace. I was far from the life I had known, but somehow, that felt right. I was starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild here. I decided to call my daughters, Emily and Sarah, to check in and let them know how things were going. I called Emily first. She picked up after a few rings. Hey, Dad, she said, her voice sounding tired. How is everything? I am doing all right, Emily, I replied. Just trying to get settled in. How about you? How are you doing? She let out a heavy sigh. I am okay. I mean, it has been a lot, you know. I am still trying to wrap my head around everything. I understand, I said softly. It is a lot to take in. But I want you to know that I am here for you, no matter what. We will get through this together. I know, Dad, she murmured. I do not know how to feel right now. I am angry at Mom, but I am also sad, and I feel guilty for feeling that way. It is okay to feel all those things, Emily, I assured her. You do not have to have it all figured out right now. Just take it one day at a time. We talked for a while longer, and I tried to lighten the mood by telling her about Portland, the people I had met, and my new office. By the end of the call, she sounded a little better, and so did I. It was good to hear her voice, to feel that connection. Next, I called Sarah. She answered on the first ring. Hi, Dad. How is Maine treating you? It is not bad, I said, smiling. Different, but in a good way. How are you holding up? I am okay, she replied. Just trying to make sense of everything. Have you heard from Mom? I hesitated for a moment, then decided to be honest. Yeah, she has been calling and texting. I have not responded yet. I need some time before I am ready to talk to her. Sarah's tone was steady. I get it. Take your time. I think it is smart. This is all a lot to deal with. Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate that, I said. I am proud of you, you know. You and your sister are handling this better than I could have hoped. Thanks, Dad. We are doing our best, she replied. Just take care of yourself, okay? We need you to be strong, too. We talked a bit more before saying goodbye. Hearing my daughter's voices made me feel a little less alone, a little more connected to the life I was leaving behind. As the day wore on, I continued exploring the city, trying to get a feel for my new home. I still had a lot to figure out, a place to live, routines to establish, friends to make, but I was starting to feel like maybe I could do it. Maybe I could make this work. That evening, I returned to the bed and breakfast and decided to check my phone again. I saw more messages from Jennifer, ranging from desperate to angry. I could tell she was struggling to understand what had happened, why I had left so suddenly, why I was not responding. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of guilt, but then I reminded myself of the photos, the lies, the betrayal. I knew I had made the right decision by walking away. I was not ready to face her, not yet. Maybe not ever. Instead, I decided to focus on my own healing, on finding my way forward. As I turned off my phone and lay back on the bed, I realized I was finally starting to feel like myself again. I was not the same person who had left Raleigh a few days ago. I was someone new, someone determined to reclaim his life, to find happiness on his own terms. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of urgency. I had come to Portland to start over, but staying at the bed and breakfast felt like I was still in limbo. I needed a place that was mine, a real home where I could build a new life and begin to heal. I decided that today would be the day I found it. I called Linda, the real estate agent my coworker had recommended. She picked up on the second ring, her voice as upbeat as I remembered. Hi, Mike. I am glad you called. I have a few properties in mind that I think you will love. That sounds great, Linda, I said. I am looking for something small and full of character, where I can feel comfortable starting fresh. You are in luck, she replied cheerfully. I have some places lined up for you that could be perfect. How about we meet this afternoon? we agreed on a time, and I spent the morning wandering around the city. I walked down to the harbor, where fishing boats were coming in with their morning catch, and local vendors were setting up stands filled with fresh seafood. The salty air and the hum of activity reminded me of how different life was here compared to Raleigh. It was quieter, more personal, yet it felt like a place that could become my own. I made my way over to the old port, where cobblestone streets and brick buildings whispered stories of the past. I stopped at a small cafe for a cup of coffee, watching people go about their lives, locals greeting each other with familiar smiles, tourists snapping pictures, and street musicians playing soft melodies. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of calm. Maybe this city could be where I would rebuild myself, piece by piece. When it was time to meet Linda, I walked over to the first property on her list. She greeted me with a warm smile and a stack of property listings. "I have a good feeling about today," she said, a twinkle in her eye. "Let's find you a home." We started with a few small apartments in the city center. They were nice enough, but they felt a bit too cramped, too polished. I was looking for something with a little more character, a place that had a story of its own. I wanted a place that could be a part of my story, too. After a few stops, Linda drove us to a small, weathered cottage near the waterfront. "This one just became available," she said as we pulled up. "I thought it might be exactly what you are looking for." The cottage was charming in an imperfect way. It had white clapboard siding that had seen better days, and a small, uneven front porch with a couple of old rocking chairs. A flower bed out front had been overtaken by weeds, but I could see patches of color peeking through. Inside, the place had a warmth to it, wooden floors that creaked just enough, wide windows that let in lots of natural light, and a little fireplace that seemed to invite you to sit by it on a chilly evening. I walked slowly from room to room, feeling the energy of the space. The living room was small but cozy, the kitchen had just enough room to cook a good meal, and the bedroom had a window with a view of the harbor in the distance. I could see myself here, cooking a quiet dinner, reading by the fireplace, sitting on the porch in the mornings with a cup of coffee. It felt right. Linda watched me, sensing my thoughts. "What do you think?" she asked gently. I took a deep breath, looking around one last time. "I think this is the one," I said, a smile forming on my lips. "It is not perfect, but it feels like home." She nodded, clearly pleased. "I thought you might like it. The owner is eager to rent it out, so we can get the paperwork started right away if you are sure." "I am sure," I replied. "Let's do it." Back at her office, I signed the lease. As I put my name on the dotted line, I felt a surge of emotions, relief, excitement, and a touch of fear. But mostly, I felt a sense of movement, like I was finally taking a step forward after weeks of feeling stuck. Once the paperwork was done, I headed back to the cottage with the keys in hand. I walked through the door and stood in the middle of the empty living room, letting the reality sink in. This was my new beginning. I looked around, imagining where I would place my few belongings, the old chair I had brought with me, my books, my guitar. I could see the cottage transforming into a space that felt like mine, filled with new memories waiting to be made. I stepped out onto the porch, feeling the cool breeze from the harbor. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, painting everything in warm golden light. I decided it was time to call my daughters, Emily and Sarah, to share the news. I wanted them to know that I was moving forward, finding my footing again. I called Emily first. She answered quickly, sounding more upbeat than before. "Hey, Dad. How is everything?" "I am doing good, Em," I said. "I found a place to live, a little cottage near the harbor. It is a bit rough around the edges, but it feels like home." "That is amazing, Dad," she replied, her voice full of happiness. "I am so proud of you. I cannot wait to come visit and see it." "I cannot wait to show you," I said, feeling my heart lift. It is a new start, and I think it is exactly what I need. After we hung up, I called Sarah. She picked up almost immediately. Hi, Dad. Did you find anything today? I did, I told her, unable to hide the excitement in my voice. A small cottage near the water. It has got a lot of character, and I think it is going to be perfect. That is wonderful, Dad, she said warmly. I am glad you found a place that feels right. I know this has been hard, but it sounds like you are on the right track. I think I am, I replied. I feel good about this. I am looking forward to settling in and making it mine. We talked a bit longer, and I felt their support lifting me up. It was good to know they were rooting for me, even from a distance. It made me feel a little less alone. That night, I sat on the porch of my new home, listening to the gentle sounds of the harbor. I felt a calmness settle over me, a peace I had not felt in a long time. I knew there were still challenges ahead, moments when the past would creep back in, but I also knew that I had taken an important step. I was choosing to build something new, to shape my future on my own terms. I took a deep breath of the cool, salty air, letting it fill my lungs. I was ready to see where this new path would lead. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I was starting over, and that was enough. The following morning, I woke up to the sound of seagulls outside my window and the soft murmur of waves lapping against the shore. It was my first full day in the new cottage, and everything felt different, fresher, more hopeful. I made a simple breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, and ate it on the porch, watching the harbor slowly come to life. Fishing boats were heading out to sea, and early morning joggers were making their way along the waterfront. As I sat there, I felt a sense of calm that I had not felt in months. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the anger, the confusion, was still there, but it felt lighter somehow, like I could finally breathe again. I knew there would still be hard days ahead, but for the first time, I felt like I was moving toward something instead of running away from it. After breakfast, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. I wanted to get a feel for the area, to see what was around me. As I wandered through the quiet streets, I found a small park with benches overlooking the water. I sat down and watched as a few kids played in the distance, their laughter filling the air. It reminded me of simpler times, and I felt a smile creep across my face. While I was sitting there, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. Hey, Dad, just thinking about you. Hope the new place is feeling like home. I typed back quickly, it is. Feels good to be here. I cannot wait for you and Emily to visit. Her reply came almost instantly, we are looking forward to it. Proud of you, Dad. Those words filled me with a warmth I had not felt in a while. My daughters were my anchor, my reason to keep pushing forward. I knew they were hurting too, and I wanted to be strong for them, to show them that we could all get through this. I decided to spend the rest of the day settling into the cottage, making it my own. I hung a few photos of Emily and Sarah on the walls, set up my small collection of books on the old wooden shelves, and placed my guitar by the fireplace. I wanted this place to feel like mine, to reflect who I was becoming, not who I had been. That afternoon, I headed out to the local market. I picked up some fresh vegetables, a loaf of crusty bread, and a bottle of wine. I figured I would cook myself a nice dinner to celebrate this new beginning, even if it was just for me. As I walked back to the cottage, I felt a lightness in my step that I had not felt in a long time. Back at the cottage, I put on some music, an old jazz record that I had always loved, and started preparing dinner. The rhythm of chopping vegetables, stirring the pot, and sipping wine felt almost therapeutic, a simple pleasure that I had missed. The scent of garlic and herbs filled the kitchen, and I felt an unexpected sense of joy. It was a small thing, but it was mine. As I sat down to eat, I realized I felt content, even happy. I knew I still had a lot of work to do to rebuild my life, but I was starting to see the possibility of it all. The past few months had been dark, but this felt like a glimpse of light breaking through. After dinner, I decided to call Jennifer. I had been avoiding it, not ready to face whatever she might have to say. But I knew it was time to confront things head-on, to set boundaries and move forward. I dialed her number and waited, my heart beating faster with each ring. She answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. "Mike?" "Yeah, it is me," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I think it is time we talk." There was a pause on the other end before she spoke. "I am glad you called. I have been wanting to explain." I cut her off gently but firmly. "Jennifer, there is nothing left to explain. I know what happened. I know about Tom. I just needed some time to process it all." She sighed deeply, her voice breaking a little. "I am so sorry, Mike. I never meant for any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," I said, feeling a strange calm. "But it did happen, and now we both have to live with it. I am not calling to argue or rehash everything. I just want to make it clear that I am moving on. I have found a place here in Portland, and I am starting over. I need you to respect that." There was a long silence before she spoke again, her tone resigned. "I understand. I am sorry for everything, Mike. I really am. I hope you find some peace." "Thank you," I replied. "I hope the same for you." We ended the call, and I felt a strange mix of emotions, sadness, relief, a sense of closure. I knew it would take time to fully let go of the pain, but I also knew I had taken an important step. I was not looking for Jennifer's forgiveness or trying to make sense of what had happened anymore. I was just ready to move on. I went back out onto the porch and sat down with my guitar, strumming softly as the sun dipped below the horizon. The harbor lights twinkled in the distance, and the air was cool and crisp. I felt a deep sense of peace, a feeling that I was exactly where I was meant to be. I knew the road ahead would not be easy, but I was ready to face it. I was ready to start over, to build something new, something that was truly mine. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I felt free. And that was enough.